Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 395 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about the moves made so far by the Atlanta Braves this offseason. Usually during the baseball offseason, we all talk about the teams who spend a ton of money on one singular player. For me, the ones that intrigue me the most are the teams who make a bunch of smaller moves that lead to a more impactful change on the overall roster. For instance, a few years ago, the Royals brought in Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, Will Smith, Hunter Renfroe, and Chris Stratton, 5 players for around $100 million combined, and they went from a bad team to a team that ultimately made the postseason. And a team I see emerging this offseason is the Atlanta Braves, who had high-end talent on their roster already. MVP winner Ronald Acuna Jr., Cy Young Award winner Chris Sale, and Matt Olson, who is capable of hitting 50-plus home runs. They just needed to add players who can play specific roles, and that's exactly what they've done so far. They've traded for super utility man Marcio Dubon, a 2-time Gold Glove Award winner, and have signed free agent relief pitcher Robert Suarez to a 3-year $45 million deal. He led the NL last year with 40 saves, and also signed outfielder Mike Yastrzemski to a 2-year $23 million deal, while also re-signing closer Raciel Iglesias to a 1-year $15 million deal, and shortstop Hung-Sung Kim to a 1-year $20 million deal. If they had only made one of these moves, I would not be impressed, but you add that all up and you've got something there. Like, I think the Atlanta Braves are becoming a team that you should start paying attention to. I predict they are going to be one of the better teams in the National League come next season. I know a lot of you look at the NL East and say it's all about the Philadelphia Phillies and it's all about the New York Mets. And you feel that way because those are the high spenders. I mean, so far the Phillies have done everything they can do this offseason because they brought back their own free agent in Kyle Schwarber. I think the Braves are the one team in the division who is actually improving right now. They are getting better while the other teams are staying the same or in some cases getting worse. These moves to me signify that the Atlanta Braves are in win now mode and are trying to move on from last year, and the man behind these moves is one of the best executives in baseball, Alex Anthopoulos, who in 2021 saved the Braves season by trading for outfielders Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, and Jock Peterson. If you don't remember the circumstances, they had lost Ronald Acuna Jr. for the season, and those moves helped the Braves ultimately win the World Series. Yes, this is a baseball executive who is capable of making the big moves, but what's more impressive to me is he makes the smaller moves that end up having a huge impact on the team. Don't get me wrong, I love when teams spend huge on one player as much as the next guy, but this isn't basketball where one talent makes all the difference. Individuals can only take you so far. The LA Dodgers aren't dominating the sport right now because they have one player who does it all. I know some of you believe it's Shohei Ohtani. It's not all about Shohei Ohtani. They have the deepest roster in all of baseball. That's why they're the best team. Getting back to what the Braves are doing, I just really respect the fact that these moves are not desperate. The Atlanta Braves were most people's choices for the biggest disappointment last season. As you are well aware, the baseball offseason is still ongoing, and the Braves could still make other moves. Most believe they should get a starting pitcher. They should definitely be in on guys like Zach Gallen and Chris Bassett. Dependable veterans. They don't need a star pitcher. They have Chris Sale and Spencer Strider. You could say that part of my faith in the Atlanta Braves right now is about the fact that they're making these moves that I think are really smart, but you could also say I just have trust in them as an organization because they've been winning for most of my lifetime. I mean, when I started to watch baseball, they were always a competitive team. They win the division a lot of the years, and if they end up having a bad season, they usually bounce back rather quickly. And it goes without saying, before these moves, the most important thing that could happen for the Braves next season is a healthy year for the likes of Ronald Acuna Jr. and Chris Sale. I mean, those are the two most important members of the Atlanta Braves. If you get a full 162 game season of Ronald Acuna Jr., he is going to be an MVP candidate, if not the MVP winner in the National League. And the same goes for Chris Sale. He could obviously win another Cy Young Award if he starts 30 plus games next year for the Atlanta Braves. Teams do not typically get enough attention for having these kinds of off seasons where you just make a bunch of smart moves in a row, because we obsess over the fact that teams like the Toronto Blue Jays give a guy like Dylan Cease over $200 million. And everyone's focused right now on where Kyle Tucker is going to end up. Right? Even the fan base of the Atlanta Braves probably isn't that excited about the moves that I'm talking about, but the way I feel about them is that they could change the direction of the Atlanta Braves and get them back on track. I mean, Mike Yastrzemski is a very good outfielder, and he doesn't have to play every day for the Atlanta Braves because they have a stacked outfield. They not only have Ronald Acuna Jr., but they also have Michael Harris. Dubon can also play in the outfield. If you listen to most experts of the sport, they will tell you that the Braves were decimated by injuries last year. Well, becoming deeper as a team can help you handle an injury here or there. Why I really wanted to talk about the Atlanta Braves is because I really do believe more baseball teams should take this approach. I get why they obsess over the star players, because your fan base gets super excited when you bring in that big name. When you give that guy over $200 million, it's a sign of you are really invested in the team overall. But this is a team sport more than most. There are 26 men on your roster, and you need to make sure that at least most of them can have some kind of impact on what's happening during a 162 game season. And don't get me wrong, I don't care that the Atlanta Braves are saving money by not spending over $100 million on one player. What I'm talking about is they are making more of an impact on the overall roster because they're adding more players than just one big name. Too many teams off seasons are, I just added this guy, I gave him $250 million. He's never played for my team before, but I'm really hoping he hits 35 homers and drives in 100 runs. And if he doesn't, then my entire offseason was a disaster. Well, with these moves, they might not all pan out, but one of these moves, probably more than one, is going to have a real impact, a positive impact on the Atlanta Braves come next season. They brought in dependable veteran players. Mike Yastrzemski, you know what you're going to get out of him. At worst, he's going to give you 15 homers. At best, he could have a season where he hits 25. And in the case of Suarez, if the Dodgers are giving Edwin Diaz $69 million, giving Robert Suarez 45 sounds pretty good to me for an elite level closer. And who knows, maybe the Atlanta Braves are still going to end up with a high-end player that nobody was expecting them to get. For instance, maybe they could swoop in and sign free agent starter Ranger Suarez right from the Philadelphia Phillies, who's a free agent. I mean, Suarez went 12-8 last year for the Phillies. Add that guy to the Atlanta Braves, your team gets better while your divisional rival gets worse. For the teams who put their entire offseason on one player, what that does is it makes that guy feel like he has to be the savior of the team. It puts all the pressure on that one move. Your executive is going to be judged by that one move. Alex Anthopoulos here is putting together a complete roster that is going to have to compete 162 games a year. Right, for as good as Juan Soto was last year in his first year with the New York Mets, he can only have so much impact on an entire baseball season. It wasn't his fault that the Mets pitching collapsed down the stretch, but putting all of that money on that guy didn't help matters. And last week on this podcast, I talked about the New York Mets offseason, and now I'm talking about the Atlanta Braves. And here's what I think is the big difference in their off seasons. The New York Mets are losing star players and replacing those star players with role players, while the Braves are adding role players to a roster that is full of stars. That is why, as of this recording, I feel way better about the next season of the Atlanta Braves than I do about the New York Mets. I believe the Braves are going to compete for an NL East title, and I definitely believe that the Atlanta Braves are going to make the postseason because they are making smart, sound baseball decisions. These are not splashy moves to just get attention. They are trying to make their overall team better, and I believe they're going to be rewarded by doing so. And another reason that I believe Anthopoulos deserves credit for making these moves, because so many baseball teams would just say, well, we were bad last year because we weren't healthy. A fully healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. will make all of the difference. He'll be an MVP candidate, and we'll ride him all the way to the playoffs. He's not doing that. He knows he's getting back Ronald Acuna Jr., but he's adding on top of that. He knows he might get a fully healthy season of Chris Sale and Spencer Strider, but he's still adding to that. These guys are kind of insurances, if you will. And when you're watching the sports shows right now, not that many of them are highlighting the moves being made by the Atlanta Braves because they are quiet moves. They're not splashy. They didn't bring in a guy who's potentially going to win 20 games. They didn't bring in a guy who's going to hit 30 home runs. They just brought in good baseball players who are going to help them get back to being a postseason caliber team. One that I believe can compete with the likes of the Phillies and the Mets and could potentially, if they're playing at their best, compete with the LA Dodgers. I also just have a feeling that things are going to be different for the Braves this season overall. They brought in a new manager in Walt Weiss. They're going to be different than what they've been over the last few years. Last year was a major disappointment. I feel like this is a roster of players that has a lot to prove. I mean, some people are down on Matt Olson. After hitting that 50-homer season, he's had a couple so-so years in a row. He's still very good, but I think this season he's going to reestablish himself as one of the best power-hitting first basemen in all of baseball. Austin Riley, who is one of my favorite third basemen in the sport, only played in 102 games last year. You have him for a full season. There are other things other than these moves that they are making that have me believing in the Atlanta Braves come next season. This is an important year for the Atlanta Braves because the window with these players is closing. I mean, take Chris Sale, for example. There are not going to be that many more baseball seasons where you can guarantee he is going to be an ace-level starting pitcher. I mean, this is a guy who's already gone through a myriad of injuries throughout his career. I like a team that's having an offseason where you go, wow, that first move they made, that's really interesting. I don't know how much better they are. And then they make a ton of moves in a row and you go, wow, something real is happening here. And that's what I think is going on with the Atlanta Braves. And if you ask the question whether or not they're they're overpaying for any of these players. I mean, the only person I've heard people talk about is Hong-Sung Kim getting $20 million. I mean, this is a guy who, if healthy, can be really good. Having said that, though, he's still a 30-year-old who still hasn't reached his full potential, so that could possibly be an overpay. But what I like about the offseason that the Braves have had is they are not relying on one player to change their fortunes. They have brought in a number of guys who can have an impact come next season. And they brought in some guys who have been on winning teams. Marcio Dubon has been on the Houston Astros. Suarez has been on the San Diego Padres. They know what it's like to be on a team that is desperate to make the postseason. What I find so funny about the baseball offseason is most of the strategies for these teams is to put all of their money into one player. Like, let's take Kyle Tucker, for example. What if a team actually does give him $400 million? What you're banking on is a guy to put up huge numbers on a team he's never played for. You're asking him to maybe be better than what he's ever been. But when you make moves like these, you're just paying these guys to be what they've been before. What I mean by that is the Atlanta Braves are not asking Mike Yastrzemski to hit 35 home runs. They don't need him to do that. They just need him to be a dependable player. Getting back to Juan Soto, the Mets need him to be an all-time great generational talent based on what they've invested in him. And some team is going to do the exact same thing with Kyle Tucker. Maybe that approach is right. Maybe that approach is wrong. I think the history of baseball will tell you that putting all of your money in one player doesn't always pan out the way you would like. I have to go back to that Kansas City Royals offseason I was talking about a few years ago. They brought in Seth Lugo, a guy who had never really been a starting pitcher regularly. They make him a pitcher. He becomes a Cy Young Award contending pitcher for a season. They bring in Michael Wacha, not a splashy name, but a guy who can pitch a lot of innings, win you double-digit games, and be a fixture in your rotation. Some might call this the Moneyball approach, giving underrated players some money instead of paying one guy $35 million a year. And I see it that way. Like, I agree with this strategy more than I agree with giving one guy $400 million. But that's not going to change anytime soon. What the Atlanta Braves are doing is going to continue to be a rarity, and what's to be expected is the team signing one guy to a deal of over $100 million, because that's the splashy play. That's the move that excites the fan base. That's what people want to see you do. And don't get me twisted, I'm not just mad that the bigger teams don't do this. Like, I think the Yankees and the Red Sox should be making more moves like this. I'm more upset that the bad teams in the sport don't make these kinds of moves to really fix their roster. Like, the Colorado Rockies should be having off seasons like this, where they're just adding a bunch of really steady hands to put together a good baseball team. The Pittsburgh Pirates should be having more off seasons like this. They should be doing what the Atlanta Braves are doing, because those teams are never going to get the big names. The Pirates lost out on Kyle Schwarber. I love the fact that they traded for second baseman Brandon Lau, but there are other moves they should be making. They should be all in on Luis Ariz. That's the kind of guy the Pittsburgh Pirates should go after, because they are a team in desperate need of offense. My point, and it's what I've been saying on this entire podcast episode, a team does not need to spend a mega amount of money in order to get better as a team to have a good offseason. You can make the smaller moves, because those moves are out there to be made. The offseason season is not over, so I will reevaluate it come spring training. But as of this moment, the team that I believe has had the best offseason so far in baseball is without a doubt the Atlanta Braves. It feels as though they came into this offseason with a real strategy of how to get better as a baseball team. And another thing that I really haven't even talked about yet is they've made these moves while these other teams have just sit and waited for these bigger names to sign. The Atlanta Braves can still possibly be in on the bigger names. Again, the offseason is still young, and the Braves have already had a loud offseason that can continue to get louder and louder. Baseball fans for a minute should take a break criticizing David Stearns of the New York Mets and start applauding Alex Anthopoulos of the Atlanta Braves, who has had a great offseason so far. And just like any offseason moves, this doesn't guarantee that the Atlanta Braves are going to be as good as I told you I think they're going to be. But I have faith in the Atlanta Braves right now because of the good offseason they have had. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcast and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.